Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you so much for being here. It is an absolute pleasure today to welcome Latvia's Minister of Defense, Ināra Mūrniece, to Ottawa today. Following our visit to Petawawa yesterday, hier nous avons vu les capacités que le Canada fournit à l'Alliance de l'OTAN et le dévouement de nos forces armées à la défense de la liberté, de la démocratie et des droits de la personne. La ministre et moi venons de conclure une réunion constructive. During today's meeting, I reaffirmed Canada's ironclad commitment to the security of Latvia and all NATO's allies. Over 5 years ago, Canada raised its hand to lead a NATO battle group in Latvia. And today, it is Latvia that is home to Canada's largest foreign military deployment. Right now, approximately 800 members of the Canadian Armed Forces are deployed to Latvia, including as part of the Canada-led NATO Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia. And when Prime Minister Trudeau and I visited Camp Adagi in Latvia, we saw NATO at its very best. Troops from 11 nations under Canadian command, training together and learning from one another so that they can defend NATO's eastern flank from any threat. Nous avons déployé nos troupes en Lettonie parce que nous croyons au principe fondamental de l'OTAN. Une attaque contre un allié est une attaque contre tous les alliés. Since the battle group was formed in 2017, our world has become darker. And that's why in 2022, we reinforced the battle group by adding additional Canadian personnel and capabilities. Last year in Madrid, Canada and Latvia signed a joint declaration to go even further. In this joint declaration, Canada agreed to continue to lead NATO forces as the framework nation in Latvia and work with Latvia and NATO allies to generate and stage forces in order to surge to multinational combat-capable brigade level, among other commitments. Detailed planning is beginning, and Canada, Latvia, and other EFP battle group contributing nations are going to be surging to battle group to brigade level. Canada also has agreed to deploy valuable capabilities to the battle group. And that's why earlier this year I announced that Canada is proceeding with 3 urgent procurements: a portable anti-tank missile system capability, a counter-uncrewed aircraft system capability, and an air defense capability as well. And Canada is committed to delivering on all of these commitments. Together, we are going to get this done. Canada also continues our important work in Riga with our cyber task force. There, experts from the Department of National Defense, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the Communications Security Establishment work alongside Latvian partners to hunt and stop cyber threats from compromising critical Latvian infrastructure. Le Canada et la Lettonie ont également travaillé ensemble pour soutenir l'Ukraine. Nos 2 pays sont d'accord. L'invasion de l'Ukraine par la Russie met en péril la sécurité des pays d'Europe et du monde entier, et l'annexion n'est pas une option. Ensemble, le Canada et la Lettonie se sont mobilisés pour donner aux Ukrainiens les outils et la formation dont ils ont besoin pour gagner. Canada and Latvia have both provided Ukraine with high-value military equipment, including howitzers, vehicles, and ammunition. And we welcome Latvia's outstanding leadership, and we must continue together to support Ukraine because the cost of doing nothing is far greater than the cost of our military aid. Today, I have some news to share on our next steps to support Ukraine. Today, I can announce that Canada and Latvia will jointly train Ukrainian soldiers on Latvian soil beginning as early as May 15th. In partnership developed between the Canadian Armed Forces and the Latvian National Armed Forces, we will deliver leadership development training for members of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, with the first of these training sessions to begin next week in Latvia. Led by a Canadian Lieutenant Colonel, the training will instruct Ukrainian junior officers on responsibilities in battle, the process of planning and orders, maneuver coordination, intelligence reconnaissance, planning, and executing. This training will complement our other ongoing efforts under Operation Unifier in the United Kingdom and in Poland. Canada has already trained more than 36,000 Ukrainian troops, and thanks to this new effort, we will be able to train even more. J'ai hâte de voir les résultats de ce partenariat et je vous remercie, Madame la Ministre, de votre collaboration pour lancer cette nouvelle initiative. As we work to defend the international rules-based order that have kept Canadians and Europeans safe, we know that we can count on Latvia as a valued friend and ally. Minister, that was certainly the tenor of our conversation this morning, and I want to thank you sincerely for your friendship and partnership. Je vous remercie de votre visite au Canada et j'ai tellement hâte de poursuivre notre travail ensemble à Vilnius cet été. And now I'll turn the floor over to you, Minister. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Minister. But let me start by commending Canadians very highly on what Canadians are doing in Latvia. Your leadership is excellent in the EFP battle group in Latvia, and your personal commitment, Minister Anand, I'd like to very highly commend. And Latvia and Canada have developed very close relations. We highly appreciate Canada's commitment and investments in defense of Baltic region, particularly in Latvia, by leading EFP battle group. Canada's leadership has been very efficient and has provided assurance to Latvian society. It is the most visible example how collective defense works in reality. The professionalism of Canadian forces has ensured that Latvia hosts 11 allies and thus demonstrate every day how well NATO's interoperability actually works. Canada's contribution has high visibility in our society. Canadian soldiers have been accepted as our own. And I'm always glad to hear from your soldiers, Minister, that they want to come back to Latvia at the soonest possibility. And this is how friendships and alliances work. We had very crucial decisions in NATO Madrid summit last year. You mentioned those decisions regarding the adaptation of NATO's posture in light of demanding security changes in Europe. Now we are looking very positively at the progress in the actual implementation of NATO forward defense concept, including transformation of EFP battalion to brigade in Latvia. I think we are on a good track in scaling up EFP battle group to brigade under Canadian leadership, which has been and is just excellent. And we say that Russia's war in Ukraine has global and far-reaching implications for a long term. We have to invest in our own defense, and we have to continue the support to Ukraine. Canada and Latvia are great friends of Ukraine, and our countries are doing tremendous work to help Ukrainian military. In this light, I'm very proud that Latvia and Canada have agreed on a joint leadership training program for Ukrainians, which will help Ukrainians to fight against Russian occupation. In this effort, Minister, we are together. And this is another step in our ever-growing bilateral military cooperation. Latvia will provide instructors for the training and all necessary real-life support for Ukrainians, including infrastructure, transportation, meals, etc., etc. And there is no end date for this training initiative, and we will remain responsive to the needs of armed forces of Ukraine. Besides investing more than 1% of GDP in military support to Ukraine, Latvia is already spending 2.3% of GDP for its own defense. We reintroduce conscription, develop host nation support, host nation infrastructure, and intensify our procurements for new capabilities. And soon, defense spending in Latvia will reach 3% of GDP. As we agreed with my good friend and colleague, Minister Anand, today, there's also a lot to discuss on NATO agenda, as we are just 2 months away from NATO Leaders Summit in Vilnius. NATO's hard defense, raising its military preparedness and capacity, should be focus of the summit. Once again, I would like to thank you, Minister Anand, and all Canadians for standing side to side with Latvians in safeguarding sovereignty and security of Latvia. Thank you.
Thank you, ministers. I will now take questions from the media. I will take one question and one follow-up from each outlet. Please state your name and outlet, and we'll go to the first question now.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Minister Anand, this is a big draw on Canadian human resources, putting this many troops in Latvia and maybe expanding again in the future. How long do you anticipate this is going to go on, and to what extent is it impacting the Canadian Forces' ability to deploy elsewhere in the world where they're needed, or even domestically here?
So when you say the word "this," what are you referring to? How long is this going to go on?
Canada's deployment in Latvia.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. We've obviously been there for 5 years as leading this battle group. We recommitted for multiple year commitment last March. And our view is that this is a very significant and important contribution that Canada can make to NATO. And we intend to be there in that capacity as a leader on the eastern flank of NATO, and in particular in partnership with Latvia and 11 other countries to ensure that we are doing our part on NATO's eastern flank. In terms of your question relating to capacity, which I think is what the gist of the question is, there is no question that we are in a rebuilding phase of the Canadian Armed Forces, and that recruitment, retention, and overall reconstitution of the armed forces are fundamentally important in terms of our increasing robustness and longevity. And so every day, the Chief of Defense Staff and I and our teams are working towards ensuring that we can increase, for example, the number of applicants to the Canadian Armed Forces. That's why you saw us late last year announce that we will be accepting permanent residents to the Canadian Armed Forces. And as a result of that announcement, we have seen applications increase by the thousands. So that is a very positive development. But growth, and systemic growth in particular, takes time. And we need to focus not only on the application process, but also other ways in which we can ensure that the Canadian Armed Forces not only sign up, but want to stay. And by that I mean retention is also very important. That's why we have come forward recently with changes to the housing benefits that Canadian Armed Forces will be able to access. We recognize that in this time of inflation, that there are added expenses, especially in terms of cost of living. And so these, Glenn, are just a few of the examples of the way in which we take reconstitution, retention, and recruitment very, very seriously. Across the country at our application centers, you are going to see that these centers are fully staffed. You are going to see that we're shortening the time of basic training so that we can encourage more applicants. In the Navy, you have likely heard about the new experience program, whereby people who may be interested in joining the Navy can sign up for a year and then make a decision as to whether they would like to stay. There's innovation occurring in terms of what we're doing to try to increase the number of applicants. This gives you a snapshot of what those innovations are. In terms of the broader international commitment, as I said, our commitment to Latvia is very secure. We are there with our largest international operation, approximately 800 Canadian Armed Forces members. Never has our commitment been more important, and not only in terms of our NATO presence, but in terms of ensuring that Latvia is aware that we are standing strongly with them at this very strategically important time in the global environment.
On a different issue, I asked you on Monday about Canadian Forces' response to wildfires in Alberta. You said then that you're waiting to hear what the request was going to be. Do you have any clarity now on what Canadian Forces are doing or are going to be doing in the next few days to help the wildfire situation?
Thank you. Yes, I remember our conversation on Monday. The RFA from Alberta has been received, and we are considering it at the Global Operations Center, the Government Operations Center, and together with Minister Blair's office. I will say that we have pre-positioned and increased the number of aircraft, including fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters, and 3rd Canadian Division personnel to assist if it is determined that those resources are necessary to respond to the province's request. I believe my wording was that we stand at the ready, and the pre-positioning of both these assets and personnel underlines that previous statement.
And we'll go to the next question.
Good morning, Ministers. Marie Rooster with CBC News. Minister, welcome. This question is for either one of you, but Minister, you said the planning is underway to ramp up to a brigade level. That doesn't sound much different than what we heard at the end of the NATO summit, but can we take by your statement that it's fair to say that you now actually have agreements from the other partners in the battle group, the other partner nations, as to who's going to contribute what, and you actually have a plan to move forward? Is that correct?
The planning that we're undertaking, and the subject of much of our discussion today, was what are the stages that we will be going through as we move to brigade level. The first stage, and the stage that is complex for Canada, given that we have 11 other countries in the battle group with whom we are speaking, is occurring right now. The Chief of Defense Staff is in Brussels, for example. He has traveled to numerous of the home countries, of participating countries in the battle group, to have these very detailed conversations precisely about the number of personnel and capabilities that would be offered by each of these countries. As I said, that is the first stage, and that is the stage that we are making good progress on, but that is still ongoing, and we will continue to put the firmness of those commitments in place as we move forward in this stage. The next stage is going to be establishing force development, making sure that we have the lead elements of a forward brigade command and control, and ensuring that we have the force generation capabilities. And the third stage will be the critical capabilities themselves from each of the participating countries. And as you saw, Canada recently announced 3 urgent procurements in terms of capabilities that we will be committing to Latvia. So it is fair to say that the process with the countries that are members of the FP battle group is still ongoing. The conversations are going very well, and we are receiving enthusiastic support. But apart from that, I can't provide more detail at this time.
It's a lot more detail.
I will ask the minister if she would like to add anything.
I'd like to say we are very happy with Canadians as a framework nation. Please believe me, I can assure you on that. And our society regards Canadian troops in Latvia as our own. And Canadians' participation and leading the EFP battle group in Latvia, it gives a lot of visibility to Canada in my country, in the Baltic region, in the eastern part of NATO as well. Yes, scaling up of the EFP battle group to combat capable brigade, it's work in progress. Today we have had working meeting discussing how we will reach the same, but it's very clear we have this aim, and we are going step by step to come to scaling up battle group to combat capable brigade. And given complexity of the issue, given that the EFP battle group in Latvia consists of 11 nations, it means a lot of political negotiations, discussions are going on, and it involves a lot of military planning as well. It's a really complex job. But Canadians, as a leading nation, as a framework nation, are doing this job excellently. And let me very highly commend Minister Anand personal efforts in this field. She's always busy. She's speaking with all nations of EFP battle group. As a host representative of host nation, I'm trying to do the same. And I'd like to say it's our common effort. Canadians are leading, scaling up battle group. Latvia is investing and hugely investing in host nation support. There are plans to build new military base and training range, which will be the largest one, not only in Latvia, but in Baltic region. And my aim is to provide the best host nation support to Canadians and all 11 EFP nations.
So if I'll just add, thank you for your kind words, Minister, a couple of points. The Minister and I both met with all of the members of the EFP battle group when we were in Brussels recently, and put on the table the very important point that we will be speaking with each of your teams and military leaders about the precise capabilities and personnel that you'll be able to commit. So the process is going well, but we will continue to have those conversations when we are all together in Brussels to ensure that we are all moving to brigade level through those 3 stages that I outlined in my previous response. And then the second point I'll just mention also is we are undertaking operation exercises right now, Maple Resolve. And what we're doing in Maple Resolve is to mimic some of the circumstances that would be on the ground in Europe and Latvia in particular. So, for example, moving machinery and equipment long distances and putting in place in those exercises similar type of machinery and equipment that we have in place in Latvia, so that our troops are very much attuned to what the environment on the ground and the context of the potential reaction to any threat would be.
And follow-up?
Yes, Minister. Separate topic. On a government-to-government level, was Canada aware that Australia, the US, and the UK were negotiating their AUKUS treaty?
As I can reiterate, we are continuing to be very interested in furthering the relationship that we have with all of the members of AUKUS. We are very engaged every single day with our Five Eyes allies, with Australia, with the United States and the US, for example, on emerging technology issues through several individual forums and working groups in cybersecurity, in space operations, and intelligence. So my approach is to continue to be a strong ally and partner in many areas, including in the areas of Pillar 2 of AUKUS, and that's really important for us to know. We have to be forward-looking about this, Marie. We have to remember that Canada is going to continue to work with NATO and Five Eyes partners, especially in key research areas, artificial intelligence, quantum research, electronic warfare, counter-hypersonics, and undersea capabilities. We are doing this. We are doing this now, and we've signed or are part of over 120 different bilateral and multilateral cooperation agreements related to information sharing and collaboration, many of those with Five Eyes allies. So it's a question for Canada of moving forward with our key partners and allies in areas where we have expertise, and that's what my focus is.
We'll go to the next question.
Hi, Ministers. Sarah Ritchie with the Canadian Press. Minister Anand, I just want to follow up on what Murray was asking you there. As it relates to AUKUS, my understanding is that the New Zealand Defence Minister said back in March that New Zealand had been asked to join Pillar 2. So I'm not hearing from you that Canada has been asked. What does it mean that New Zealand has been, and presumably we have not?
I'm not going to comment on the statements of another country and another minister. I will comment on what we are doing in Canada and what my role as a Minister of Defense is in this regard. And for us, ensuring that we have strong partnerships with our allies is fundamentally important, especially in this heightened global security environment. That's why, with our deep expertise in advanced quantum technologies and cyber and space robotics, we are continuing to grow our domestic ecosystem for defense innovation. That's why we announced, for example, that Canada will host NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic in Halifax, because we know that we have strong expertise in the areas of innovation and research, and we want to continue to contribute not only to NATO, but our Five Eyes allies partnerships. And so the most important thing for us is to remain actively engaged with our allies, and we will continue to be very interested in furthering these relationships. I want to point two examples. We're working with Australia on missile threat detection. We are doing important work on undersea Arctic acoustic surveillance with our Five Eyes allies. That's the specific type of initiative that Canada will continue to undertake as we look to the future in continuing to build strong relationships with key allies and partners.
And follow-up?
Yeah, I'm hoping both of you can weigh in on this. As it relates to the new training program in Latvia, what does this tell us about the state of the war in Ukraine, which we know has been long and grueling, and we know Ukraine has faced many losses. The idea that it seems to me this is an effort to train people more quickly with a little bit more urgency than bringing them to the UK. So can you tell us what's going on there?
You go ahead. I'll follow you.
Well, I'd like to start by saying that Russia is waging brutal war in Ukraine, and Russia wages this war not only against military, but also against civilians. I mean, women, elderly people, children, even infants, as well as strategic infrastructure of the country. It means that Ukraine suffers very heavy losses in this war, and the heaviest loss is loss of human lives. We can rebuild infrastructure, but the loss of human each human life is unique. We must help Ukraine as much as we can to safeguard democracy, to safeguard core human values in Ukraine. Maidan, or dignity revolution in Ukraine, started in 2014 with Ukrainian aspirations of the nation to West, with aspiration to join EU and NATO, to belong to Western value system, to belong to all democracies. And I've been to Ukraine just 1 month after the war started. And what I saw, it was convening of Ukrainian parliament when, in a time when Russian forces were very close to Kiev. It means it's a real effort to safeguard democracy, to live according to Western values, and we must help Ukraine in those efforts. That's why together with Canada, we are joining forces to train Ukrainian soldiers. My country understands the situation. We are very close to war zone. Canadians understand it very well, and I'd like to commend Canadian efforts in this field. Latvia, our military assistance to Ukraine has reached 1% of our GDP. In comparison, our defense spending has reached 2.3% of GDP. It means our military aid to Ukraine is about half of our military budget. And this new effort is to help Ukraine to win this war against Russia.
Well, thank you. I agree with everything that the minister has just said. From a Canadian standpoint, this new initiative that we are undertaking in training Ukrainian Armed Forces members in Latvia is an extension of the training that we, of course, have done since 2015 under Operation Unifier. And we have trained over 36,000 Ukrainian Armed Forces members, and we're continuing that training in England, in Poland, and now in Latvia. And I think that what we should interpret from the extension of Operation Unifier into these countries is the deep commitment that Canada has to Ukraine and to continuing to train Ukrainian armed forces, of course. But it is also a recognition that our world is growing increasingly dark, and that 1.5 years into the further illegal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin, we cannot let up. We have to continue to ensure that we are doing everything we can to help Ukraine fight and win this war. And that is why Canada has put on the table over $1 billion in military aid and equipment and over $8 billion in financial aid overall. And that is why we are, on a per capita basis, the leading donor to Ukraine in terms of all of our aid amongst G7 countries. And again, it is underscoring the point that this war does not seem to have an end in the near term, and we have to continue to do whatever we can to aid Ukraine in its time of need in order for it to maintain its democracy and territorial sovereignty, and in order for us to support the rules-based international order that has kept us all safe since the end of the Second World War.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Thank you, everyone. That'll conclude today's press conference.
Thank you, everybody.